Hello everybody and welcome along to today's webinar all about mastering mistakes. My name is Calvin and I will be your host and presenter for today. And I am joined by Duncan, who will be in the background available to answer any questions that you may have throughout the session. So let's have a look at the contents of today's session. So firstly, we're going to have a quick introduction of mistakes and correcting any errors. Then we're going to have a look at the restoring a backup option, followed by the rollback option. So the two processes in order to be rolling things back or redoing any kind of tasks that you may need to redo. We'll then have a look at FPS adjustments, that adjusting your HMRC payments, and then having a look at adjusting employees' pay, following off with some further support and questions at the very end there. So the session's due for about 45 minutes. The presentation itself should only take about half an hour, but we will make sure we've got enough time at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can. Now, it is quite a busy session as well, so apologies if there is any delays on getting any answers to you. But we will be working tirelessly to make sure they're answered as quickly and as often as possible. So thank you for your patience in advance on that one. Right, let's get started with the introduction. So firstly, we've got a couple of examples of what can go wrong. Now, I appreciate at this stage as well, there are going to be a lot more scenarios than what we have on screen here today. And luckily, the process that we'll be showing you will fix about 99% of them. So don't be worried if you don't see your particular scenario, if you have made a mistake previously on this screen. This is just some of the more common situations that you will see. So just a little bit of a caveat there. We've popped in a few examples, such as over or underpaying employees, statutory payment errors, so sick pay having been misentered or something like maternity pay being misentered as well, wrong pay date as well, wrong national insurance category, and of course pension errors as well there. So these are just a few examples of what could go wrong. Now, mistakes are a part of life as well as payroll, as I'm sure a lot of you may well know, so there can be quite a few more than that. But there's some examples straight away. So what options have you got when it comes to a mistake that may have occurred? So the first one is possibly the simplest out of all of them, is just to correct the error in your next pay run. For example, if you have underpaid an employee, you may want to pay them extra in the next pay run. That is completely up to you if you wish to do that. Again, there's just a scenario on that one. However, there may be certain situations where you can't do this, in which case you will need to reprocess your payroll. So this is where the processes that we'll be running through will come in very handy. So you can either restore a backup or roll back and then simply run the payroll again, submit your FPS adjustment, and then adjust any employees' pay and HMRC payments. So we're going to be focusing on that aspect of it, so that reprocessing of payroll in the session today through both of those different processes. Speaking of which, brings me nicely onto the very first one, which is restoring a backup. Now, we often advise to take multiple backups or as many backups as you possibly can. And this is the reason why. So when it comes to correcting any mistakes, having more backups is better than having not enough. All right, so too many is a lot better than not enough when it comes to backups. So please do make sure you are backing up regularly. And of course, storing those backups on a removable hard drive or a cloud-based storage system if you can as well. So what is restoring or recovering? So this is where you will restore your own backup, or you can recover automatic backups if you haven't taken one, which I hope is never the case because you should be taking backups regularly. And this would be when to use it during recent mistakes. So if you've just made a mistake in the most recent payroll, or it affects all or most of your employees, because restoring will reset the program for all employees as well. We are going to jump into a demo to show you the restore or backup, and we'll go through a couple of different scenarios for that. But the best way I like to describe restoring or taking backups is if you're ever working on a piece of work, for example, you'll be saving it often. So if you're working in a Word document, Excel document, any particular document you're in, if you are saving it regularly, it's the same thing what you're doing here with taking backups. So if anything does go wrong, you can simply get back to a certain point in time. The restore wizard, as you can see on screen, is the process that you'll be going through when restoring a backup. And there's a couple of things we've highlighted here in this wizard. And again, we'll show you in the demo these in action a little bit. So the first one highlighted is data files. Now this is the most common, and you'll see when we go in the demo that this is the one that's highlighted by default. What this is your basic data. So your payments, company information, everything to do with that, your statutory payments, your renter payments, your employee data, all of that is held in data files, which is why it's the only one highlighted when it comes to restoring, because 99% of the time, that's all you need to restore back. We have highlighted the RTI file section because we have had questions before, and it is worth remembering this and noting this. So what this does is it restores your FPS data. So every time you send an FPS, that data is stored in the program so that it knows the last time that you sent one. Now, if you were to restore RTI files, the payroll, to put it a better way, would simply forget that it's ever sent an RTI or a FPS up until that point that you've restored back to, in which case, if you have sent any FPSs after that, they will be forgotten by the program, but most importantly, not forgotten by HMRC, which means if you then submit another FPS, your figures are going to be doubled. Only time really that this is to be used is if the program thinks it's sent an FPS, so the last FPS date is showing, but HMRC have confirmed that they have not received anything. That would be the only time you'd need to do that. So we've highlighted it because we do get questions often, and there has been cases where RTI files have been restored, which can cause a few issues in the long term, and it does involve a few calls to HMRC. So that's the reason it's highlighted. It's not going to be what we're showing in the demo, but just be aware that it is there, but please do avoid it unless specifically told by one of our support team. So as promised, I'm going to demonstrate this now. So let's jump into our Sage 50 payroll program where we have our data now. So we've completed September pay. However, we found a mistake in August pay, so most recent, but it was for all employees. We forgot to add a payment for everyone. End of summer bonus, we'll call it. Can be anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to restore a backup to then be able to add that payment in and reprocess the payroll for everybody. So what we need to do is go to File at the very top. Then we have Restore. If you don't have a backup, you can use the Recover option for the automatic backups. However, we're going to be focusing on Restore today. So we click Restore, we get the Restore wizard up. So let's click Next. Here you'll see our files. Now I am going to select RTI files just to highlight what I mean by that, because you'll notice there's a last FPS date if you see where my cursor is. Then click Next. I'm going to browse. And you'll see we have our backups here. Now I've labeled them or named them this particular thing for my own personal preference. It can be different for you. You can name your backups whatever you want, but I've got them 3 per pay run, where we've got pre-update, updated, and then completed available. So we've got August updated, which is what we're going to go ahead and select. And you can see we've got September complete, so we can get back to where we are. Let's open that one up. Let's click Next and then Finish. We'll have a little scroll bar going through, and it will prompt us for our password and username. So let's just use the manager one and click OK. Now you'll notice, close our advice center down, that our last updated date is back to August. So we've just finished August. We need to now add the payment in September for the most recent one that we've done. but you'll notice our last FPS date. So I actually took this back up before I submitted our FPS for August. So now the program not only thinks that September's FPS is missing, but also August's FPS is missing. So that's just to highlight what RTI files can do. But remember, if they were received by HMRC, sending another one doesn't overwrite, it simply adds on top. So you'd ultimately be owing HMRC double than what you should be. And it can get a little messy to clean up, but again, you would need to do that directly with HMRC. So that's restoring a backup. What you would do here is then go ahead and reprocess the pay period that you need to do, in our case September, and then submit the FPS adjustment. And we are going to show you that, but we're going to do it a little later in the session. What I will do now is we're going to restore back to where we started. So again, highlighting the two files, clicking browse, then we need to find September complete, and then finish. So the main purpose of this demonstration is just to highlight how multiple backups can aid you, even when correcting a mistake. Before you start to correct that mistake, take a backup, and it means that you can then start again if anything still goes awry. Okay, and it just allows you to pick up from specific periods rather than having to reprocess unnecessary things if you need to. So that's where we say like multiple backups is really useful to have. And then you can see last FPS date, last updated date back in September. Okay, so it is key having a lot of them. And like I say, it's the equivalent of saving your work in any other document. And it just allows you to redo things as well. So that was restoring a backup. So as you can see, it's a nice simple process. And as long as you've got a backup before you start, as I did there, you can get back to where you go. So always have that confidence knowing that you can ultimately get back to certain areas or where you started from as long as you have a backup. So if that gives you a little bit of confidence to then go and be brave and go ahead and do any corrections or any processes that you can, if you've got a backup, you can go back and redo things if you need to. So that is restoring a backup. So the next option, the second option, is the rollback feature. So what's a rollback do? Well, a rollback simply removes the payment history for selected employees. And here you can choose the period to roll back for. So this is a really good one to use when you're reprocessing earlier periods. It only affects one or some employees. It'll save you a lot of time reprocessing unnecessarily. And if you've got no backup available, of course, which I hope is never the case, especially after today's session. Quick screenshot there on the rollback employee wizard. So what we'll do now is let's jump into the program and I'll show you a rollback in action. Just hide the reminders there. So we're going to have a couple of employees who we need to roll back. So we've got Dane here and we've got Stan. These are the two that we're going to be rollbacking today. Rolling back, yes. Rollbacking is not quite a word, although we can try and coin it as a rollbacking. Let's have a look and show you what we'll be correcting. So for Stan, and we're going to do this separately, by the way, we have some absence, we've got some sickness. And he's been on sick quite a lot. Unfortunately, he didn't come back for these 2 weeks in September. So we now need to enter additional sick pay that need to be paid on September's pay, but weren't processed. We weren't told he didn't come back, so we didn't enter it in the payroll. Okay, so that's quite a common scenario there. For Dane, however, we need to go back to a previous tax year, and we need to reprocess last tax year. So we're going to do them first, because I do want to show you the process of what to do if you need to roll back to a previous tax year as well. So to do that, highlight your employee, then click on tasks at the top this time and go to rollback. You can also find the rollback in the links option down here. So if you click on that, you'll get our rollback employee wizard. Now the first thing it's asking you to do is, as I mentioned earlier, take a backup. Just means if you need to redo it, you can. So we'll click next. We have our employee in the list. Click next once more. And here we have all the periods that's been updated for this particular employee. Now, if you're weekly, you will see them in tax weeks. Obviously, we are a monthly payroll in this one, but the process is exactly the same. Now, the key on a rollback is you'll be selecting the period, and when we go to do stand there, we'll show you that a bit more. You're going to be selecting the period that you're looking to redo or start to redo from. So if it is the most recent, in this case, tax month 6, or September's pay, then we'll just be highlighting section 6 at the top. A lot of people think, oh, I need to do September, so I need to go to this one. It always takes you back to what's called a pre-updated state, so before you updated records for the period you've selected. So if I did select period 5, what would happen is I would then need to reprocess August unnecessarily as well as September. Okay. However, for our employee today, we're doing a previous year, so we all need to go all the way back to period 1 for this tax year. We click next and finish. Yes, we are going to clear all our year-to-date values because they need to be re-put in, and click OK. See, now we don't have a last updated date. Okay, we've now undid everything. So we hit the rewind button, or Control Z if you like, undo options in any documents for Dane here. So they've got no payment history for this current tax year. They do still have an FPS date, but we'll get onto that in a minute. We now need to change our process date back into the previous tax year. So I'm going to put it as the 30th of March. Could be any day in the previous tax year. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and roll back again. So let's click the rollback option in the links option. Click next. Again, we've got our employee there. Next once more. And there you will see all of the previous periods in the previous tax year. It's based on that process date. So if you do need to roll back an employee to a previous tax year, you can do so, but you have to run the rollback twice. Okay, you have to clear the first tax year, and then once you've done that, clear the second. Okay, so let's take it back just to the final period for time's sake. Click OK, and you'll see now we have our last updated date of February. You'll also be noticing that the last FPS date currently says March. That's because we've set the program by changing the process date into the previous tax year, and that was the last FPS date of that current tax year. So what we'll do now, we've already got our process date say back to March. Let's go ahead, we'll do some reprocessing for Dane here. So let's enter payments. So at this point, everything you've done for Dane up to this point now has been undone. So you've basically got to redo it. Now, we paid him some commission. It was £200. Fortunately, we missed off 300, so he was meant to get 500 in March last year. Save and next. Now, bear in mind that the scenarios can be different, but ultimately you will either be restoring a backup or rolling back in order to redo anything you need to do. So do appreciate everyone has their own individual scenarios, but these two processes that we've just run through will be the ways to fix them. We'll click save and next, close that, and we'll update records. We'll not upload his online payslips, although you would be doing that a little bit later, or you can do it at each period if you haven't already for his corrected pay run. Again, to save time, we're not going to run any reports, but please bear in mind that any pre-update reports are only going to show Dane on this or this employee that you've rolled back, because these have all been updated, so they don't show on any pre-update reports. So in that scenario, you can run the report and then attach it to the original if you wish, if you're printing them off. Or of course, you can wait until you've done all the updating, and then all the post-update reports will show correct again. So like I said, let's quickly get up to date. Now, because we've just done the previous tax year, this is a little bit of a spoiler for the next section. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do Stan instead, actually, and then we'll show you the next section. So I'll not do the spoilers just yet. We are going to have to look at updating HMRC's record for the year-end submission, but we'll do that in the next section. So let's go ahead and roll Stan back now. Now you'll notice there are no periods showing. So it's a little oversight. See, mistakes happen in webinars as well. This is a little oversight, but it's a good lesson. So there's no period showing for Stan at the minute. Now the reason for that is we've got our process date still in March. So what we need to do, take us back to September and then do the rollback once more. And there's the periods appearing. So we are just going to do the one period for Stan because we do need to enter that sick pay. There we go. And you'll notice that the last update for Stan is now changed to August. So that was the last time the program thinks his pay was updated. Everything after that, it's as if it never happened. Okay, so you're basically doing it again. So those are the two rollbacks done. So let's go ahead and start reprocessing things, which we'll do in the next demonstration, because it's now time to talk about FPS adjustments. So what is an FPS adjustment? So once you have finished the reprocessing, which we will be doing shortly, you need to submit an FPS adjustment, because this will show HMRC as well, the difference between the original FPS, so the original one that was sent, and the new corrected values. So it doesn't send the new total figures, it simply sends the difference. So it's informing that HMRC that your figures need to be either reduced or increased by a specific amount. You only do this once. So an FPS adjustment only needs to be sent once. So in our example, when we had multiple periods being rolled back, if they're in the same tax year, you'll just be simply processing each period until you're back up to date. So until that last updated column matches that last FPS column again, then you submit your FPS adjustment. So you only need to do this once at the end of reprocessing. The exception to this is what we're going to be showing for Dane, is when you have to roll back to a previous tax year. Now there is a little note at the bottom there, because if you are correcting more than one period, when you send that one FPS adjustment at the end, on the surface, so on the screenshot is what you're seeing now, it will only show the figures for the previous, the most recent period, sorry. So it's only going to show the most recent period's correction. So if you're having to correct a pay for multiple periods, so let's say it's £100 for each month and you've done month 10, just to make it nice and easy. The figures aren't, it's not going to show you 1,000 on there, which is obviously 10 times 100. It's only going to show you 100 because that was what the most recent period was. Don't worry though, the information is carried over for the previous periods. It's just in the background, all right? So it only shows you the previous period. So when you are doing that, keep an eye on that one, all right? But there's nothing wrong. So if you're thinking, oh my God, where's the previous period's corrections gone? They're there, they're just not on the surface of it. So before we get into that, let's dive into our program once more and we'll get some reprocessing done and we'll submit an FPS adjustment. First person to do is going to be Dane here. So let's change our process date because we need to redo March, our final period of the year, which we did. I almost forgot about that. So we've reprocessed March, but what we need to do now is, because it was in the previous tax year, we need to correct our year end. The good news is, if I go to e-submissions here, we have this option here, amend a previous tax year. So if I click on that now, it's going to ask for a late reason because it is a few months after. So correction to earlier submission, click OK, click continue. You'll notice the name of this submission. So although we've called it amend a previous tax year, what's actually being sent is a full payment submission adjustment or an FPS adjustment. So can't remember exactly when it changed. I know it was quite recently, a couple of years ago. It used to be an earlier year update. It's now just simply another FPS adjustment. To make it as simple as possible in the program, we've called it amend a previous tax year. Okay, but it does just submit an FPS adjustment, which we're going to go ahead and submit. So there's our liability adjustment because we added £200 to his pay. Hit submit and then close. So we've done that. Now that we've completed the previous tax year, We've now amended the figures for the previous tax year as well through that earlier year, not earlier year update anymore, the FPS adjustment. It's now time to update the records for the remaining periods. Now, what we're going to be doing in this one, again, just to save a bit of time, is just assuming that our pay is now correct for day and for the remaining periods. So we're just going to simply update each period back up to date. Let's update records. Click OK. Change our process date to May. We've got a few to do, so I'll try and get these through as quick as possible. So we're not going to jump into enter payments each time. Normally you would do this just to make sure it's correct. As I mentioned, just to save a bit of time, we are just going to update and assume that our pay is correct. So you'll notice I am having to update records for each period we've undone by changing the process date each time. You would then normally go in to enter payments, run any reports that you need to do, then update records. You would need to do that each time for each period. Change process date once. I think it's 2 more times to do it. Click yes, finish. So before we do September's again, you can see we're last updated in August. Remember, we have Stan here. We need to reprocess Stan's sickness. So let's open up their employee, go into the absence tab. You'll notice the sickness that was in September is no longer there because we've rolled back, so it was undone. Now we can re-enter the sickness for the full month of September. There you go. Press save and close. Now we are going to dive into enter payments for this one. Did forget to change the process date. There you go. Just to show you that message again, actually. So if I go and enter payments now, we get this little error message to say that some of the employees have either already been paid, or updated, or left the company, marked on hold, or have some manual statutory payment entries, or have a change of pay frequency. Now, if you ever get this error, it is always one of these 5 things. So it's worth checking those. In this case, it's because I've highlighted employees who've already been updated for September. So if I click yes, it simply unhighlights them. If I move that out of the way, you can see. So we paid Stan a little bit, which for the 2 weeks we thought he was at work. So let's zero that off. Go to the summary, make sure it's just a statutory sick pay. Save and next. And that is Dane's new payments, the increased commission. And again, update records. There we go. So we are now back up to date. And the way I know that is because the last updated date is now the same as the last FPS date. So you can see there in the 2 columns, that last updated date says 30th of September, which is mirroring the last FPS date. So now I can go ahead and submit my FPS adjustment, which is labeled FPS adjustment in the tasks list here. So click on that. Again, click continue, hit submit. There is our 2 amounts of adjustment. Now it just so happens Stan has 0, and the reason it's showing as 0 but allowing me to do it is because we've entered additional sick pay, which does need to be reported, even though the liability didn't change, because previous period he was owed, he was due no tax anyway because of the amount that he was being paid. So again, if you ever see zeros, there's still a change in the background because that employee would simply not be included in the FPS adjustment if there was nothing to change. And that can go for things like leave dates, where you just need to add a leave date in, whereas the pay is correct. So there are certain things that you'll change where pay is going to be the same. Just be aware that if you did try and do an FPS adjustment, you would get an error message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to submit that now. And just to show you that, let's highlight the other 3 that were fine. It's going to let me do it for all 3. Must have been messing around with the data previously. Fortunately, I can't show you because I have changed a few things whilst in preparation. So what happens is when you FPS adjust and there is nothing to actually send an adjustment, you'll get an error message. It'll have a list of the employees just saying that there's no adjustments been found for these employees. Okay, so it won't let you send an adjustment if there's nothing to actually change, to put it bluntly. And as you saw, especially with day in there, we went through this current tax year and we reprocessed multiple periods, but I only ever did one FPS adjustment right at the very end. So that is your pay now corrected. So you've gone ahead, you've rolled back, or you've restored a backup. You've done any changes that you need to do, or you've done it again with the correct values or the correction that you've made that you needed to make. And then you've gone ahead and adjusted your figures across to HMRC by sending that FPS adjustment. What this means now is any post-update reports will show the correct values, any payslips will be updated. So your payroll is now up to date with everything. The only things that you'll need to do after this, which is worth mentioning now, will be things like if you've done the nominal link, you won't want to be doing the nominal link twice. So I will show you this. So if you go into company and then nominal settings, you'll need to change the drop down to file, and then you'll need to post the nominal link again to file, and then make the adjustments in Sage 50 accounts manually. Okay, so once you've corrected, you will still need to post the nominal link, but do it to file first. Once you've done it to file, you can come back in here, change it back to 50 accounts, and then you can post as normal going over in time. So that's if you are using the nominal link. You will need to change that drop down to file once you've done your corrections. Remember, it's same as the FPS adjustment. Once you've done your correction, go ahead and change that to file and post to file. The other thing to mention is going to be pensions. So pension data can be submitted across to your pension providers. Now, the one thing I will say on this is once you've updated and corrected your payroll, your pension figures will now also be correct, which includes any reports. What I can't say, however, is how your pension provider wants you to update those. So your reports will be correct. So now it'll just be a case of speaking with your pension provider, who will then inform you how they wish to proceed in terms of correcting it on their end as well. But you will have the relevant figures, so you'll have the reports to hand, which will be able to give you the comparison on what adjustments you need. It may well be that they ask for you to submit the file again, which again, you can simply run the report if you're running it that way, or they'll manually adjust it on their end. Each provider has different processes, so it is a case you'll need to speak to your pension provider for that one. But just bear in mind, once you've corrected it, your reports are now correct as well. So that's the FPS adjustment. So ultimately what we've done now is our payroll program is now all correct. We've either restored a backup or we've rolled back, reprocessed everything correctly, how it should have been in the first place. Whatever the issue may have been, it's now corrected, and you've submitted your FPS adjustments, and of course, contacted your pension provider and posted the nominal link to file. The next thing to do is going to be adjusting your employee's pay. Now, the good news here is nothing you need to do in the program because you've already done it all. All you'll need to do there is compare the new pay slips with the original pay slips, and then be able to pay the employee the difference in the net pay directly through your bank into their payments. So it's comparing the original pay slips and the corrected pay slips to find the difference in net pay, and then simply make that additional payment to an employee for an underpayment, or when it comes to their next pay, deduct any overpayment from the employee's next payment. All right, but bear in mind, this is all done through your bank because you've corrected everything in payroll, so their pay slips will show the correct values either next period and this period if it's an underpayment. This is adjusting HMRC's pay, not employees' pay. As I mentioned, there are going to be mistakes, maybe deliberate, who knows, in the session on the slides today. So this is actually adjusting your HMRC payments. So comparing original and corrected P32s. So once you've re-updated everything, your P32 reports are also going to be updated because remember they are post-update. So you can compare those and you'll be able to then find the difference in the values you need. Then you'll either be making an additional payment or deducting an overpayment from your next one to HMRC. Now, there is a little star there because we do advise you need to speak with HMRC to confirm that. Unfortunately, we cannot speak for them and how they wish to have either any overpayments deducted or underpayments to be paid back. You'll need to speak with HMRC. That tends to be the norm, where you either make an additional payment or it's then deducted from your next bill, as it were. But please do speak to HMRC to find out for sure. So that pretty much wraps up the session for today. We overrun slightly there, so apologies there, but we do still have a few minutes until the 45 minutes is up. So I do want to run through some further support with you all. And the first one is our help center. So you can visit sage.co.uk/help to search through our knowledge base. So if you've got a specific question that may have only come to you once the session has ended, which is always the case when it comes to me, I always think, oh, I should have asked that at the time. Well, if that does happen, visit our help center, pop the question in the search bar and have a look through our knowledge base for all the various guides based on that question. We have support guides available, access to our webinars. We do run webinars weekly, so do join us next week for a couple of sessions, and you can find the links to register in our help center. There are videos to watch, and of course, if you do need to speak to us, we have the get in touch options. And the other thing to try is you can now access your help center directly from Sage 50 Payroll. So if any of you are actually in the program right now, it doesn't matter where you are in the program, because it'll be interesting to show you and actually get you to do this. Press F1 on your keyboard when you're in the program, or click any of the help icons, and you can access our help center directly in the program. Best part about that one is if you are in a specific area, such as the rollback wizard, and you press F1, you'll be presented with articles all about correcting mistakes on the rollback feature. Or if you're in the employee wizard in the absence tab, you'll get articles on the absence as well. So it does bring up the most relevant help dependent on where you are in the program. So my advice on that one is just give it a go. It's F1 on your keyboard or clicking any of the help icons. Best part is it stays on screen whilst you're working in payroll, so it doesn't actually affect anything in the program. And last but certainly not least, Sage University. Now, if you'd like to expand your Sage Payroll learning, then what I would say is head on over to sageu.com, register for free, and then you can access e-learning, Sage product certifications, and bite-sized learning is available as well, which can be done in your own time and at your own pace as well, which is brilliant. So I highly recommend, if you do get a spare minute or two, head on over to Sage U and have a look through that as well. So we are going to spend the next 5 minutes, or the last 5 minutes of the session, answering any questions that you might have. So I will be jumping on mute very shortly to do that for you all and help out the guys who've been tirelessly answering questions there before. And I'll be back in about 5 minutes to say our final goodbyes. If you are leaving us at this stage, thank you so much for everyone who's attended. It's been an absolute pleasure to see so many people on today. So thank you so much for that. Now, you will be directed to a short feedback survey. And I know I do sound a little bit like a broken record when I say this, because I know you probably hear it through every support channel that you've ever used. Doesn't matter if it's Sage or mobile phone provider, anyone, you tend to get asked for feedback surveys. But what I can say is Duncan and I do read that quite religiously, and we do try to make as many changes as we possibly can to our sessions based on that feedback, and it does help give us a bit of inspiration for any new ideas that we can come up with for our webinars. So I do appreciate you spending just a little bit of time filling that in when it comes to either the end of the session or you do leave us today. So thank you so much. And I will jump on mute now, help the guys out with questions, and I'll be back very shortly to say our final goodbyes. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we have come to the end of the session, so I thought I would just jump on whilst the final questions are being answered there. Thank you to everybody who has stuck around until the end. It's been an absolute pleasure again, as I mentioned earlier, to see so many people on the session today. I certainly hope you have enjoyed it. Don't forget as well that everyone will be sent an email with a link to a recording if you'd like to watch this back at all. And it is this point, if you'd like to keep the Q&A, if you want to copy and paste that into a Word document before we do come to close the session. The last thing to say from me is, again, thank you once more. Hopefully, we will see you on some future webinars. Don't forget to visit the Help Center. Click on the webinars tab to view our schedule for that as well. We've got a couple running next week, hosted by Duncan as well. So that's always exciting, and really look forward to seeing as many people on those sessions as well. Hope you're looking after yourselves out there still and staying safe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.